You're tuned into Inside Lowell. Inside Lowell podcast brought to you in part by Washington Savings Bank, serving the greater Lowell community for over 130 years. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank.
WellPoint. Unicare is now WellPoint. New name, same commitment to Massachusetts. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point.
Boston North Company, offering a wide variety of business solutions to help restaurant and retail clients save money. Boston North. Mahoney Oil Company, providing warmth and protection to families in Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. That's Mahoney Oil. Francis E. Preventia Insurance. For auto, home, business, and life, trust the agency Greater Lowell has counted on for more than 40 years. Francis E. Preventia Insurance. GoPuff. A grocery store right at your fingertips. Use the code Lowell20 to receive $20 off your first order of $21, plus free delivery. Download the GoPuff app or visit gopuff.com today. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Tsonga Center in Lowell. Get your tickets today by visiting masspirates.football.com. And now, time for another Inside Lowell podcast. Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I am your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful downtown Lowell. Unicare is now WellPoint. New name, same commitment to its members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And we thank our friends at WellPoint. We thank all of our sponsors for helping to make this podcast, all of our podcasts, and for that matter, all of Inside Lowell possible. And we're excited on this podcast to introduce you to a new face, kind of, in the Lowell political arena. He is running to be the representative for the 18th Middlesex District, a seat currently held and has been held for a decade by Ratty Mom. And he's gotten into a dare I say, crowded and very interesting race here, but he's also an interesting gentleman. We want to introduce you to him. Andrew Kollar is joining us here in the studios. Good morning, Andrew. Welcome.
Good morning, Teddy. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. I always start whenever somebody's running for office for the first time. The standard question is always, who are you and why are you running? And oftentimes, Lowellians have seen their candidates in some way. Either they've run for a different office or they've been out there and about. You have been active, but you're a real newcomer to at least the elected office scene. So tell us a little bit about who you are and why did you decide to run for state rep?
Sure. Starting off with, who am I? I was not a native Nowellian by birth. I moved here in 2015. I grew up in New York, was educated in Philadelphia. I lived in Jersey for a few years and did one semester living in Rome, Italy. And then when my wife and I decided where we really wanted to live, we said, Massachusetts is a good place for us. And we came up and we visited Lowell for one anniversary one year, and we really liked it up here. It felt like a good fit. So since we've been here in 2015, we've bought a house. We've had two beautiful children. And yeah, I sat on the Lowell Sustainability Council for a term. And what most people really know me as is an architect in town. I've been an architect since 2014. I'm licensed in 6 states. Most of the work we do, especially since the pandemic, is on the residential side of things, additions, new buildings, things like that, and light commercial, so fitting out office spaces. The Salvation Army, when they did their courtyard redevelopment project in downtown Lowell, we did that. The homeless shelter, we've done a bunch of projects for them over the last couple of years. So why am I getting into this race now? Essentially, when I moved up to Lowell, I've always been very active with the American Institute of Architects. Our local chapter in the state is AIA Massachusetts, and they encouraged us, reach out to your local legislators and let them know they have a resource in your community. Somebody that can talk articulately about things like housing, zoning, energy, infrastructure. Well, we tried that. I tried going to our current representative's office hours at the Donut Shack, and unfortunately, I was there alone. Nobody was showing up. I would call the State House and ask, well, is the representative coming? We don't know where the rep is. That's comforting. All right. I go down to the State House. Once in a while, I might get to talk to an aide, but there's never any follow-up. So it became readily apparent over a few years of trying this, our current representative is just simply not listening. And that wasn't okay with me. So I've been pondering when I wanted to get into this for the last couple of years. And again, after the pandemic, we were interested in having kids, focusing on the family life. So it didn't make sense 2 years ago, but I looked at the candidates that were running and I really just simply wasn't impressed. One side said, hey, we're going to have more of the status quo that doesn't work, or we're going to have a very far left progressive candidate that to me just didn't have the experience. And everything I kept seeing about this young man was that he was a better fit for trying to run for something like city council before getting up to something like this. I look at it from the perspective of I've been involved in community service in every city and town I've ever lived in. As a teenager on Long Island, I was helping my grandfather run the North Bellmore Civic Association. I even won a citizenship award from the Nassau County Legislature for that. When we lived in Bloomfield, New Jersey, I was on the Morris Canal Greenway Committee, and we were talking about historic restoration of important buildings in the community. When we moved up to Lowell, yeah, I mentioned the Lowell Sustainability Council. And I think what most people will remember from my tenure on that was I was the guy sitting there going, let's actually weigh all of the sides of an argument before we rush to a decision. Things like the National Grid pipeline modernization project that went through the Highlands. All kinds of environmental activists were flooding into our town saying there's a blast radius by a school and a church, and this is going to be a disaster, and we can't do this. Well, I sat there and said, let's actually look at the materials that were filed. And I made my own maps, I ran my own calculations, and the answer was a lot of it was hyperbole. People were just promoting misinformation, but it sounded good. So that must have made it okay. And ultimately, we put forward our report to the city council, letting them know, here, look, there are legitimate questions that should be asked, and there's a responsible way to go about approaching issues like this. But that doesn't mean it's all bad just because it involves natural gas. Yes, we want to transition to a clean energy future, but that is going to take time. And ultimately, that whole thing got kind of derailed. That was back when the city council chambers kind of got taken over by activists when those questions were supposed to be asked. That whole thing kind of fizzled. I'm not even sure if the project ever moved forward in any sense. But yeah, why am I running now? To me, there's honestly only one good reason to ever run for elected office. It's a belief that there is public good and that you can do good in your community. My profession almost beats it into us. 3 magic letters, HSW, health, safety, and welfare. Everything we do is intended to uphold those 3 qualities of the general public. So when I look at public office, what does an architect do? We are the team leader. We are the ones that are corralling all of the different interests, whether it is the building officials that want you to meet code, whether that is the building owner that wants to just have a usable space, that is all of the consultants, the engineers, the contractors. Everybody has different priorities. So we're the ones trying to figure out how do you find compromise and get things done. I grew up in a household full of conservatives. I'm used to hearing opinions that I don't agree with or I don't necessarily like, but we get along because that's how government should be. We should be governing from the center, and I consider myself a left-leaning centrist at the end of the day. I think that's why you see examples like Governor Baker was a good testament to finding Democrats that could support Republican agenda. Maura Healey is achieving a similar thing right now. Not quite to the same approval numbers that Baker had, but yeah, even Republicans are respecting what she's doing on many issues, and that's something that's commendable. So when I start seeing options for candidates that are going to be trying to move us to the far left, all I hear is we're going to be going back into brinkmanship, partisan politics, and to me, that's not how you get anything accomplished. You get things done through practical politics, listening to what people have to say, finding compromise, and really trying to not let perfection be the enemy of the good.
I have to tell you, you've certainly piqued my interest, and maybe a couple of viewers out there or listeners of this podcast who didn't know you. And I want to touch on a lot of that, because a lot of this is central to the issues that you want to focus on. But I have to go back to very early in that answer. You decided to anniversary in Lowell. Was Hawaii booked, or the Bahamas? I'm fascinated by that. What made you want to come to Lowell to kind of get an anniversary, what I would imagine, weekend getaway?
Sure. If I remember, most of our anniversaries up until a couple of years ago were essentially long weekends, 4 or 5 days maybe. We did Hawaii one year in 2016. Fortunately, my wife's job had to send her down there for almost a month. So I'm like, you know what? They're going to have to pay to fly you back. I'm going to fly down and join you. Okay. The 2014, when we had started this idea of where do we want to move to in Massachusetts. Again, on paper, yeah, the trip was officially to Boston, but the price of hotels in Boston is outrageous. So we initially got a hotel in Burlington, as I recall. Mm-hmm. But we figured, you know what, let's float around and see what other towns are in the area. And Lowell just sung to us.
What was the song? What sold you? What made you say, you know what, this is where we want to set up our life, raise our family?
It's funny because you wouldn't even expect it. That first night we came up here, I think it was a Thursday afternoon, if I remember right. Pretty sure it was pouring rain. We had walked around Mahler's Antiques on Middle Street, which isn't even there anymore. I just remember we had the best conversation with the shopkeeper at the time. He was telling us about, the Russian Icon Museum in Clinton's is a lot of fun to visit. We've been there a couple times. We had gone over to the Smokehouse Tavern when they still had normal evening hours, not the middle of the night hours. I can't even remember the last time I've been in there anymore. And we're like, it's a college town, but you know what? It's got a lot of character. It's got a lot of charm. And then again, when the time came to finally make the commitment, we're like, all right, where is the place that we can afford to live right away? And all signs just kept pointing to Lowell. Everywhere we looked, every apartment was like, we went to one down in Reading. And it's like, the floors are all diagonal. I'm like, this is going to drive me insane as an architect. I'm not going to be able to live here. And we went over to a place in Somerville. I'm like, okay, this is really awkward. We're hiking up 3 stories to get to an attic. I don't even know how we're going to get a bed up these stairs. And when we finally just went down the list, it's like, everything we need is here in Lowell. Everything is reasonably convenient. Whether you want local small businesses, mom and pop type shops, or when you really do just need the big box stuff, yeah, you can either pop over to Drum Hill, you can run up to Nashua. Again, it's a little cliche at this point, but it really is true. There is a lot to like about Lowell.
I think that would be a great tagline for a commercial. The other thing I find refreshing is you don't pull any punches. I was going to ask you, I have a note here, the Civil War, the what I call the Highland Civil War that's been going on forever, since Ratty Mom got elected. Sure. But but most first-time candidates just kind of run their campaign, talk about their issues. You actually had criticism for both the incumbent, which is natural since you're challenging him, but also the other main challenger who's now running for the second time. Is this going to be your campaign style? Because if it is, this could be fun.
Again, I think the mustache kind of speaks that I like a little sense of whimsy. I like having a good time. Call it the New Yorker in me. At the end of the day, yeah, I tell everybody, I am the absolute worst liar you are ever going to meet. And the reason for that is I can't do it. So at the end of the day, if you ask me a question, you might get an answer that's, all right, I don't know that, or I have to do a little more research to become better informed about it. But I'd rather just answer the question. I want to just get to the point. I don't want to sit here beating around the bush. And yeah, if I have a problem with one of the other candidates, I've got no problem calling him out on it. Heck, Earth Day was a little over a week ago, and I'm still getting used to doing Facebook. I avoided it for 20 years. I like, again, my close circle of friends, family. I like personal text, emails, things like that. Social media, trying to call attention to myself and what I'm doing, that's a little new, but it's important to me that the community sees what is going on. And I kind of even bucked my own trend at that point, saying, you know what, I'm really trying not to call attention to the other candidates. I did thank Tara in one of my early posts because at least he was willing to sit down and have a coffee with me. We don't agree on plenty of things, but again, this personable young man, we got along fine. Ratty, I actually sent a message asking him about what's happening on your vice chair of the Global Warming and Climate Change Committee for the last session as well as the current one. This is a committee that's been in existence for almost 20 years. It's never put forward a single piece of legislation. The last oversight hearings happened in 2016 and 2017. I appreciate that you're pulling a paycheck for this, but level with me. What are you doing to earn it? If you're literally just weighing in on other committees and that's how this is happening, please disclose it, because the public has no information that this committee actually has a purpose. So when you sit there and say, hey, is the legislature getting things done? You had State Auditor Diana DiZoglio on recently, and she was talking about the importance of auditing the state legislature. What a refreshing idea for accountability.
So thank you. Would you support that? Because that's an interesting topic. If you get elected, will you kind of work with others who have said, yeah, we're okay with it? Will you work with them to?
Yes, I will support that. I will get, again, freshman legislator is always going to be trying to broker relationships, network, build coalitions so that over time you can move into getting your own legislation move forward. The reality is, whatever the Speaker of the House wants to set as the agenda, that's what's happening at the State House. To me, the way you get things done at the State House as a freshman is you look to existing legislation that's already pending, and you look for how can you wordsmith it, how can you amend it to sneak in the other things that aren't quite there just yet. And that's where I'm seeing deficiencies right now. So when it comes to something like auditing the legislature, yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of incumbents that are not going to like that idea. I believe in accountability. If people don't know what's actually happening, that's a problem. You wonder why people don't trust their government or they don't trust their local politicians. If they don't know what's happening, why should they?
Refreshing. I have to ask this question because yesterday we posted a story, InsideLowell.com, and if you haven't seen it, get on over there, seen it. It's about Dave Willett, a familiar name. He's run for state rep twice. He's run for city council twice. He is running for state rep, maybe. Dave Willett says that if he's running as unenrolled, not going to hold any fundraisers, not going to throw a campaign party until the primary. And then if Ratty Mom wins, he's going to stay in the race and challenge him as an unenrolled candidate. If Ratty Mom loses to Tara Hong, he's going to pull his name from the ballot and endorse Tara Hong. And then he threw in a little interesting curveball. He said, if Ratty wins, Tara Hong and his team are going to support me. Tara Hong said to me, I can't speak for my team, but I'll find a way to work with Dave's campaign, which I found interesting because you've got Democrats and you're in the Democratic primary.
Correct.
And one has already said, I'll support the unenrolled guy to beat the incumbent who won the primary. If Ratty Mom wins, will you throw your support behind him as a fellow Democrat?
Yes.
If Tara Hong wins, will you support him?
Yes.
Okay. So
unequivocally.
So you will support the Democratic candidate, whoever it is.
This is how I believe politics is supposed to be when you run in a primary. You are essentially signing off that the winner of that primary, that's your guy. You don't have to necessarily like losing. Nobody does. But the reality is that when the race is over, the race is over. You don't cling to it. When you start going down that path, you start getting into things like election denialism. You start getting into people questioning the legitimacy of elections. And to me, this whole thing that Dave is proposing, honestly, it's one of the most bizarre political strategies I've ever heard. And I'm a big fan of reading biographies of political figures.
Not holding back.
No. Again, I like Dave. I've spoken with him in the past. I've worked with him in the past. Again, architects and health inspectors, yeah, we're kind of playing in the same sandbox. I respect what he does for a day job. The thing is, this is just weird. I'm really struggling to figure out what to make of this. I don't like hearing when Tara says that he personally will jump on the bandwagon for that. No, to me, this whole thing just reeks of desperation. I know everybody wants Rep Mom to be out of this office. And that's been clear when he's had primary or multiple primary challengers almost every election cycle. I think 2018 was the only one he didn't. Yeah, we all want the same goal. But again, I would rather see Dave running in the Democratic primary with the rest of us, as he probably originally intended to, and then got into this thought that this is the better way. Admittedly, I tried reaching out to Dave weeks ago. I reached out on his LinkedIn saying, hey, could we sit down for a cup of coffee, get a sense of what your intentions are? I've been hearing rumblings around the community that you might want to run as an independent. Admittedly, I didn't get any response. So in that sense, great. It's really no different than what my experience was with Rep Mom in the first place.
Don't take it personally. He ignored me for a couple of weeks as well. I don't think he wanted anyone to know about the unenrolled part, but
fair
enough of everybody else. We're chatting with Andrew Kollar, candidate for 18th Middlesex State Representative, first time running for any office here in the Mill City. So let's talk about the issues that are central to you. It sounds like you're not happy with the constituent services the incumbent is providing, and that's a very common complaint. What will you do to make yourself accessible, available? Have you thought about that, what your plan is for getting out in the community and listening to your residents?
100%. And there's absolutely no way that you can talk about this race in this particular district without talking about constituent services. If anything, we're all beating the same dead horse because nothing is happening. If you go to my website, there is a 10-point constituents bill of rights. This is really the only promise that I'm officially making, because at the end of the day, I don't believe in overpromising. If you can go to any politician you want and they're going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. I'm going to tell it like it is. So when I give you my constituents bill of services or bill of rights, they're going to be things like, yes, we are going to establish office hours both at Beacon Hill and in district. I'm not going to jump and say we're going to set up a formal office here in Lowell. Again, if costs allow us to do that, wonderful. Otherwise, I have no problem following what Rep Mom intended by saying, yeah, I'm going to show up at this coffee shop on this day of the month, every month for these 2 hours, whatever block it is, and that's where the community can come out and talk. I'm going to be showing up to neighborhood organization meetings on a regular basis. Now, again, there are multiple ones. You can't show up to every single month, but you should be showing up throughout the year. That doesn't mean just on election cycles, which is what we get right now, if we're lucky. We should be talking about having more multilingual options available. I think it's hysterical when Tara points to the 40-something pieces of legislation that he would support on his website. And again, it's exhausting trying to go down that list. You know what the very first one on that list is? We need to have more multilingual options so the public understands what's going on at the State House. Well, only one candidate's website actually translates into Khmer, into Portuguese, and into Spanish. And that's mine. I actually think it's astounding that more candidates in this area don't have multilingual websites. I mean, literally, you pay a fee for it, but yeah, you click a button and it automatically puts it in a language that your constituents might be able to read. To me, I spend every day trying to get along with people and trying to hear their point of view. So I have no problem getting along with Republicans or independents or Democrats. Wherever a good idea comes from is fine with me. So I believe the importance is in thinking for oneself and going in with an open mind. And I can be flexible on things because I'm not an expert in all matters. Things like education, again, I was educated at the high school level and younger in New York. So I grew up with things like the New York Regents. That was our standardized exam. Up here we have the MCAS. So when somebody in our community, a young professional, asked me about it, my first reaction was, I need to do a little research on this. I don't know what the current issues with it are. Again, doing just a little bit of insight into this finds, the teachers union is behind this. We are one of about 9 or 10 states that are still holding on to this, and there's a national trend moving away from it. You know, common sense says that this is where we're going to be moving, whether the legislature wants to take that action via the Thrive Act, or we want to have it go as a ballot question that kind of forces legislators' hands. I can live with it either way. But the reality is, somebody in the community brought an issue to me that, again, I didn't even realize was a problem. When I talk to teachers in the community, the drumbeat I keep hearing isn't about we need more money. Massachusetts is actually pretty good on compensating teachers. From what I saw, depending on whose metric you look at, we're either the 4th best compensated for K through 12 or the 7th best. Where we lack a little bit is on higher education. And that's where things like the Cherish Act can try to make amends for 20, 25 years of stagnation. But again, I want to find ways to hear what does the community have to say, and if I can learn from it, great, let's move in that direction. If there are topics that I do know something about, all right, I'm still interested to hear differing opinions. I can respect that. That's all I ever ask. If somebody comes to me with respect, that's what you're going to get in return. I might not give you the answer that day. Give me a day or two to do a little bit of research, and then let's have a meaningful conversation on it.
There's been a lot of talk about giving teachers the right to strike in Massachusetts, and in some communities they have, and there's speculation that if the next contract negotiation doesn't go well, it could happen right here in Lowell. Should teachers have the legal right to walk out and strike?
It is a very hard question to answer. I'll be brutally honest. It's the same type of thing about workers at the State House and whether they should have the right to unionize. I respect a lot of what unions do. Collective bargaining has a long, important history in this country. And I do get really, again, when we're talking about means of production, fabrication, things like that, very easy for me to wrap my head around. Carpenters Union, yeah, you guys are great. I was happy standing out in front of City Hall with you a few weeks ago, demanding that we take action on wage theft. Real issue in the construction industry. When you get back to things like teachers or government officials striking, that puts a knot in my stomach, because I sit there and go, how long are my kids going to have to go without having a teacher in their school? We saw what the pandemic did, just trying to move into a fully remote system, and it hurt kids. We did what we had to do because it was a complicated situation. Nobody really knew how to handle it properly. I don't want to outright say they shouldn't be able to, but I feel like there needs to be guardrails on that so that, yeah, kids can continue to be getting an education in a meaningful capacity if a strike or something is happening. Same thing with workers at the State House. And again, not working physically in the State House right now, I don't know how rampant abuse is at that level. That was something that I would have to learn more about, and I think that's more of an on-the-job training type thing. But yeah, I'm fully in support of the concept of unions and labor. I just want to make sure there's a way you can do it when, again, kids or government is the one that's being challenged.
This isn't going to score you any points in the Democratic primary, but I happen to agree with you, and the way I explain it to friends of mine is I think there's a difference between, and you use the word that I'm going to start incorporating into my discussions, and that's when you're talking about the means of production and whatnot. Those unions, I fully understand. I also think there are associations, and my teacher friends get livid when I liken them to the Major League Baseball Players Association, but that's what it is. It's the Mass Teachers Association. Yes. And an association to me isn't, as you said, a carpenter, plumber, whatever.
It's
but
a different thing.
Enough of me getting you in trouble. You can do that on your own quite well, I think.
Again, am I going to get myself in trouble? Yeah, somebody's not going to like what I have to say here and there. But the thing is, my goal is not to be liked by every single person on the planet. I think that's more of a young man's game that, yeah, you want the world to like you. Well, again, I'm just going to tell you what I think. If you can convince, I'm always open to hearing new opinions. I can be swayed. That's kind of one of the funny things. I keep getting emails from organizations that are like, oh, do you want our endorsement? Fill out this questionnaire. And I read through so many of the questions, and some of them just go way afield of what the actual mission of these organizations is. But I look at them and go, you know, I can't give you blanket yeses to every single thing you ask for. And I'm pretty sure there's one candidate that is willing to do that, and that's fine. But I want you to actually state that publicly and believe in it. I can't do that. I'm going to sit there and say, well, I've got to qualify this question. And when I've got to qualify half the questions on there, you know, I'm not going to waste my time doing them if that's the result I'm going to get.
That's far too nuanced for 21st century politics. Let me give you another topic that'll maybe take some folks off. Housing. Housing is a central part of what you're talking about. In Lowell, we just spent 2023 having the holy war over ADUs, and now we've got to worry about it becoming a statewide issue. But specifically ADUs, should the governor's proposal to basically make it a right statewide, should that go through? Will you support that, vote for it?
As written, no. With amendments, Yes, because here's the thing. I know a lot about ADUs. I probably actually know more than almost any person in the state on the issue because a couple of years back, I sat on the International Code Council's Building Code Action Committee. That is an organization that writes the model building codes that are used as framework all around the country. Specifically, the International Zoning Code, I wrote the language for what should be the guidelines for designing accessory dwelling units. That was looking at what is currently in effect in 38 plus states and various jurisdictions, and how do you do this in a responsible way? It's not easy because it kind of treads two different lines, zoning and building code. On the zoning side of things, it's a little more straightforward, and where the governor's policy is currently missing the mark is eliminating the owner occupancy component and eliminating the parking requirement wholesale if you live within half a mile of public transit. Again, developers love focusing on public transit and transit-oriented design as an excuse for why we don't need more parking. Parking has a lot of loaded issues unto itself, but the reality is we live in a car culture. We do not live in Denmark. We are not a bike-centric culture. We should be doing more with complete streets to encourage people to walk or bike. But when you say, hey, I live in the Highlands and I need to get over to downtown Lowell, all right, for some people, yeah, a quick trip on a bike isn't a problem. For others, yeah, that's just not going to work for them, or it's not time convenient. So to me, yeah, you got to leave that as a case-by-case scenario that town should be governing. When you say that all one family or 1 and 2 family dwelling zones should allow ADUs by right, if there's an owner occupancy component, I don't see as much of a problem with it because that encourages you to have senior citizens, older relatives living in the house with you, and that encourages you to keep your kids in the house longer, especially as I think everybody recognizes Massachusetts has a real spending problem right now, and the cost of living is just simply too high. When our young professionals are getting the best education in the country and then realize, hey, I can't afford a house here, and then they're fleeing the state to go find better fields, you know, this isn't gonna work. When it comes to housing, yeah, ADUs, it's a small step. It's a good step. But again, people get misled as to what as of right means. As of right doesn't mean that you can build something just because you're king of the castle and you feel like it. You still have to file a building permit. You still need the building department to review it. I've never had a problem with having a zoning board or a planning board in control of saying, yeah, this is the responsible way to do it. Now, if the governor's bill wants to say towns cannot deny that reasonable conditions should be set, yeah, that's fair. I have no problem with that. But yeah, again, one size fits all is why we have so many problems in the first place.
And that's what I wanted to kind of follow up with, because the 18th district, which you're running for, is the only one of the 3 Lowell state reps who's just Lowell. You don't have to deal with anody outside of Lowell. You've got the Highlands, you've got the Acre, etc. Your fellow...
did you know we have 1 block of downtown?
No.
The one with the high school. There's not one person that can vote on it, but we get 1 block of downtown.
And 305 Dutton Street, which is why I was a resident of your district. But the 17th, currently held by Vanna Howard, has part of Tewksbury. 16th, held by Rodney Elliott, has part of Chelmsford. And those communities are now grappling with the MBTA community situation. And just kind of curious your thoughts. It doesn't really affect Lowell, as I understand it, because we're above and beyond what needs to be done. But some of these communities are pushing back, and specifically is Milton, I believe, is the one that said no, and now the governor is threatening to withhold funding, and it's going to go to court ultimately. Those types of punitive measures, how would you deal with them if you had a legislative voice?
Interesting question. I'll give you. I'm not familiar with what's going on in Milton. I can't remember the last time I focused on anything happening in Milton, other than maybe I had a project that passed through it. I personally hate punitive measures in the first place. I'm going to pivot just slightly on the question, keeping it Lowell-centric. My house was built in 1930. And this is a city that developed over hundreds of years. So I respect that you have many, many parcels, depending on what neighborhood you're in, that don't comply with modern zoning. They're considered non-conforming. Now mine, the house fills up almost the entire lot. There's not 1 square inch that you could put a driveway or a garage or anything that would accommodate off-street parking. So I've been appreciative that, yeah, we can get a reserved parking space in this city, which for the last number of years is $10 for everyone. Well, this week everyone's talking about, oh, it's going to be $120 now. I'll give you, the $10 is probably far below what it should be. Jumping to $120, you've essentially punished all of the people that live in areas where, again, housing density is much higher. The streets can't necessarily support all of the extra cars on there. So, I sit there and go, I think this is a little too heavy-handed. You're kind of missing the mark. I don't like punitive measures. And in some sense, yeah, you are going to need them. But a good example of where something I see as a punitive measure, and oddly enough, it's something that goes against conventional smart growth zoning practice or planning practice, which is something that I support very strongly in most other realms. Congestion pricing. When you talk about, oh, we're going to drive down into Boston during peak hours, you're going to pay higher tolls to get in. To me, it's no different than when you have Ticketmaster having a controversy because Taylor Swift tickets are selling like hotcakes, and all of a sudden, oh, it's surge pricing where we're going to jack the price up. I don't buy dynamic pricing models. Yes, it sound economic theory, supply and demand. I get that. To me, it's literally just taking advantage of the consumer, or in the case of congestion pricing, it's the government taking advantage of the individual.
You briefly touched on the exodus from Massachusetts. You've talked about students just leaving. They can't afford housing and can't find jobs. It's not just students leaving though.
No,
this has been a problem for a while. If you look at it, we've lost 2 congressional seats. There's an argument that we probably should have lost another one in the recent census, but based on the counting, etc., that's a topic for another day. But it should be a troubling trend for Massachusetts why so many people are relocating, especially people of wealth. Are they leaving because of the high cost of living? Are they leaving because of the high cost of housing? Or are they leaving because of the high cost of taxation?
I'm going to choose D, all of the above. Every single one of those is a factor in this. Again, the high cost of living is one thing. People want to go down and visit Boston or something. Yeah, you're going to be paying for a night out. It's going to be an expensive night. That's fine. It shouldn't be the case when you're coming out to visit downtown Lowell or something. Unfortunately, right now, it's really not that bad to come out for a Lowell festival. My family tries to get out to almost everyone that we're able to. Housing is the biggest issue right now. I got very, very lucky that we bought our house in 2017 when we did. It was a $250,000 house marked down to $235,000. You look at Redfin or Zillow, those numbers are now in the mid 400s, and based on the available housing stock, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that value is probably even higher for what the market would allow. The reality is, young people, if I had to go buy a house right now, I have no idea how I would be able to do that, short of saying I'm willing to go move further afield than where I really want to be. Now, you're going to hear people beating the drum for affordable housing over and over and over again. The thing is, Lowell is actually pretty good on the affordable housing front. I think we're something like 51, 52% affordable housing stock. And that shouldn't mean that developers like Sal Lupoli in the Hamilton Canal District get a free pass to say, we're going to do all market rate housing. That's not going to work either. The way that you get diverse housing stock, inclusive communities, you should mix the two together. When the person in the affordable unit doesn't look all that different than the person in the market rate unit, your community improves. And the easiest way I can look at that is, again, I grew up in the suburbs of New York. I'd go into New York City on a fairly regular basis. You take the train and you're going past the projects and you look at it and go, do people really want to live there? And the answer is no, they don't. They're there because they have to be. So you need to find ways that, again, the housing all blends together and it's aesthetically pleasing. Because, yeah, if you're just saying we got to crank out as many housing units as possible, Just make army barracks at that point, because you're just treating people like human livestock, and that's wrong.
All right. And with that, let me give you one last landmine to possibly step in or try to avoid. But the tremendous, massive influx of migrants into the state, into the city of Lowell now. And, you know, for folks who want affordable housing, well, if you keep overpopulating, guess what's going to happen to the price of housing? But specifically on that, the right to shelter law, which was intended to originally help, you know, battered women escape an abusive relationship with their kids, etc. It has been expanded to the point where now migrants are eligible and also getting preference. Does that need to change, Andrew?
It needs to evolve, and some steps are being taken on that front. First and foremost, I want to be very, very clear. I hate that the media has run with the word migrant as much as they have, because it has effectively lost all meaning to the general public. We're not talking about legal or illegal immigration anymore. People hear migrant and they automatically assume it's people flooding our southern border and it's an illegal situation. The thing is, the migrants that are here in Lowell right now, they are here legally. These are families that have been vetted. They're not doing anything wrong. So any of the fear mongering about our streets are less safe because of them, spare me. We are not any less safe than we were before. Lowell has plenty of problems to keep our law enforcement guys entertained and constantly working. This is not exacerbating that problem. I applaud Maura Healey's use of things like the Inn and Conference Center to find additional space for sheltering in the short term. If you have facilities that have beds that were going unused on a large portion of the year, all right, put them to work. Now, that's the key word right there, put them to work. I'm hearing now that a lot of these migrant families, they want a way out of the shelter system. And the way to do that is they need to get work permits. We can keep saying we're waiting on the federal government to get us money, unless we're going to suddenly have a huge blue wave coming in November that's going to suddenly change one house of Congress and preserve the presidency and keep the other one. You know, maybe don't bank that that's coming. Instead, we need to be taking action that's actually cutting down our costs now and finding a way that we can afford to keep doing these things. Because when we're relying on surplus money from years past, that money's not going to keep lasting forever. And you can't keep asking the taxpayer to shoulder the burden. It's just not responsible politics.
That was probably one of the most fascinating, if not the most fascinating, introductory interview of a candidate I have ever done. Don't change.
Again, you said
it may not help you in a Democratic primary or any primary, but don't change, because I really do think if more people had plain speak and at least research the issues as you clearly have and to form your opinions, I think we'd have much better government. So
I agree. And again, I think the way that we move in a direction of people trusting their government and actually believing that government is doing the will of the people, you need politicians that are actually willing to speak to the truth, that are willing to sit there and, every now and then, people aren't going to like what they have to say. But again, I'm not running to be a celebrity. I have no interest in that. I mean, it's funny. I've had people that outright come to me and say, don't you want to win? And the funny thing is, yeah, of course I want to win. But the thing is, I can only win one way, and that's with my integrity intact. At the end of the day, whether I win or lose this election, I don't lose this election. Because at the end of the day, what's the worst that happens? I don't have to commute to Boston every day.
Spend more time with your wife and kids.
I get to spend more time with my wife and family. I get to continue doing a job that I am just damn good at, and I'm really proud of the work I do and all the people I help on a regular basis. Again, the way I look at it is, I lose this election, it's a loss for Lowell. It's not a loss for me.
Sounds a little arrogant, but you know what? I understand exactly where you're coming from with that.
Again, every politician you talk to is going to come to you with a sense of humility. How many of them is genuine, and how many of it is because it's what you want to hear?
Love it. If folks want to know more about your campaign, more about the issues you stand on, if they want to see your full constituent Bill of Rights that you talked about, give us your website, your
you got it,
your Facebook's, Twitter accounts. If you have any fundraisers coming up, here's your chance to plug them.
Fair enough. www.andrewkollar.com. Kollar spelled Kollar. You can find me on Facebook, which is where most of the news is being published right now first. That is at Vote Kollar. Twitter has the same. Again, if you want to see things on Twitter, tell me that, because I'm not seeing much of a Twitter presence anymore. I think people are kind of fleeing that. But again, the important thing to me is that all of the news that is coming up on Facebook is getting put on my website on the news section, and there is a button on there that you can toggle for Portuguese, Khmer, or Spanish if English is not your first language.
All righty. Andrew Kollar, thank you for joining us here in the WellPoint studios. Good luck out there on the campaign trail. I'm sure we'll touch base many times.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Teddy.
Thank you, and thank all of you for catching it as well. I found it enjoyable. I hope you did too, and more importantly, I hope you found it educational. Thanks for joining us here at Inside Lowell. As we like to say, if Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, be safe, everybody.